Your fridge is counting down. 4 hours without power, maybe 6 if you don't open the door. The house gets colder by the hour. Your phone's at 30%. You've got some canned food stacked in the pantry, a few bottles of water, a flashlight that works. But here's what you don't have: a plan for the toilet when the water stops flowing. No system for staying clean when the taps go dry. And when your neighbor knocks asking what's happening, you realize you don't even know how to get reliable information anymore. This isn't about being weak or unprepared, it's about design. Nobody ever handed you the blueprint. Here's the gap nobody talks about. Federal guidelines say you need at least 1 gallon of water per person per day, and most families discover they have less than 2 gallons stored when the crisis hits. Then there's the panic buying. Most households burn through $400 in the first 48 hours, grabbing anything that looks useful, only to get home and realize they still can't answer the most basic question: where do we go to the bathroom without turning our home into a contamination zone? November 9th, 1965. New York City goes dark at 5:27 p.m. The entire Northeast loses power, over 30 million people. Subways stop between stations, streetlights die, traffic signals vanish. For 13 hours, one of the most advanced urban grids on Earth is just cold buildings and dark streets. But here's what most people forget: the blackout itself didn't break people. What broke them was having no system, no plan, no routine to fall back on when everything familiar disappeared. This wasn't about romance or adventure. This was about engineering versus chaos. You're about to learn 3 things. First, the Cold War-era mechanism that kept households functional for weeks when infrastructure failed. Second, why that mechanism breaks in modern homes even when people have gear and supplies. And third, how to copy it today using things you already own. There's a single line buried in the civil defense guidance from that era, a sentence so plain and boring that almost everyone skipped right past it. But that line is the reason some families held together for 30 days, while others fell apart in 72 hours. Remember that. We'll come back to it. The math on blackouts is brutal, and civil defense planners knew it. When urban water systems fail, whether from attack, accident, or grid collapse, sanitation breaks first. Not food, not heat, toilets. Because the average toilet in the 1960s used 5 to 7 gallons per flush. And when the water stops, people start improvising. They grab buckets without liners. They dump waste in random corners. Within 12 hours, they've created contamination zones inside their own homes. The Cold War guidance wasn't theoretical. It was built on the assumption that you might be sealed in your house for 30 days with no running water and no sewer service. The solution wasn't complicated, but it was specific. You set up what they called a fixed sanitation station. 1 5-gallon bucket, 1 roll of heavy contractor bags, 1 container of absorbent material, sawdust, kitty litter, or lime, a pair of gloves, a lid that seals tight, and a rule you never break. The station doesn't move. You place it once, in a private corner with ventilation if you can manage it, and you commit. Every time someone uses it, you add a layer of absorbent. Every 24 hours, you seal that bag, move it to a second, larger container somewhere outside your living space, and you reset with a fresh bag. The mistake most people make is improvising every single time. Different spots, no routine, no absorbent layer. That creates splash contamination, odor that spreads, and within 3 days, you've got flies or worse. The fix is dead simple, and you can do it tonight. Pick the corner. Tomorrow, gather those 5 items. Use a permanent marker to label that bucket waste only. That's your immediate system. Now, if this lasts 30 days, you scale it. You add a second bucket dedicated to gray water, washing hands, rinsing dishes, so you never cross-contaminate. You add a third bag layer for anything hazardous if someone gets sick, and you start a log, 1 tally mark per use, so you know exactly when to rotate bags and when to replenish your absorbent supply. One of the core principles in civil defense literature was blunt: sanitation discipline prevents more casualties than food stockpiles ever could. If you fail here, it doesn't matter how much canned soup you have. But sanitation alone won't save you. You need water, And that's where most modern households collapse without even realizing it. Water storage was everywhere in Cold War-era preparedness materials. The standard American home back then didn't have rows of bottled water waiting in the garage. There was no bottled water aisle. Most homes didn't store dedicated emergency water at all. The guidance told families to use cleaned milk jugs, soda bottles, any food-grade container they could find, and rotate those containers every 6 months by pouring the old water into gardens and refilling from the tap. So here's the self-test, and it's brutal. If the water stops today, how much usable water do you actually have? Not soda, not juice, water you can drink, cook with, and use to clean wounds. Most people realize they've got less than 2 gallons total. The federal standard for survival is 1 gallon per person per day, half for drinking, half for basic hygiene. A family of 4 over 30 days needs 120 gallons. That sounds impossible until you break it down. The immediate fix is small but non-negotiable. Find 6 1-gallon containers. Fill them. Label each one with today's date using a permanent marker. Store them somewhere cool and dark, away from chemicals or sunlight. That's your week 1 buffer. If this thing lasts longer, you scale. You add a rotation schedule. Every 3 months, you use the oldest water for laundry or watering plants. Then you refill and redate those containers. You add purification methods, at least 2. Boiling works, but it costs fuel. Household bleach works if you use 8 drops of unscented bleach per gallon, wait 30 minutes, and mark the container. Water purification tablets work if you've got them stocked. The mistake is thinking, I have bottled water counts as a plan. Bottled water without rotation goes stale, and without a strict rationing rule, it disappears in 4 days. The rule you need is gallons per person per day, tracked on a chart in the kitchen where everyone can see it. When you're cooking, you use less water by choosing dry goods that rehydrate with minimal liquid. When you're cleaning, you use a gray water hierarchy. Wash hands first, then dishes, then floors, all with the same basin of water. Water isn't just survival. In a 30-day blackout, water becomes currency. It decides whether you can cook, whether you stay clean, whether infections take hold. And that brings us to the next problem. If your cooking method isn't safe, all that water you saved won't matter. Civil defense guidance didn't push giant propane stoves or open fires. They emphasized small, controllable, indoor-safe cooking methods that wouldn't fill your home with carbon monoxide or announce your presence to the neighborhood with a column of smoke. Here's the safety line you need burned into your brain. Never run grills or generators indoors. Carbon monoxide kills silently and fast. So here's the self-test. Can you make a hot meal right now without electricity, without producing visible smoke, and without poisoning your air? Most people can't. The immediate fix is choosing one method and testing it this weekend. A small charcoal grill works, but only outdoors or in a garage with the door wide open and airflow you can verify. A canister camp stove works indoors for short bursts if you crack a window. Alcohol burners are quieter and produce way less carbon monoxide, but they're slow. The key is repetition. You actually cook one full meal using your chosen method and you time it. How long does it take? How much fuel does it eat? Does the room get smoky? Does the smell hang around? If this lasts 30 days, you reverse engineer your entire menu. You stop cooking 3 meals a day. You cook once, early morning, and you stretch that heat across 2 meals. Hot breakfast, then something warm for lunch or dinner. You choose foods that need minimal water and minimal fuel. Oats, rice, pasta, canned beans, dried soup mixes. You avoid anything that needs long simmering or high sustained heat. And you rotate your fuel. 1 canister open and in use, 2 sealed as backup, each one labeled with the date you cracked the first seal. The mistake is assuming you can cook the way you normally do. You can't. Cooking without a grid is a discipline. It's slower than you think. It's louder. It smells more than you expect. And if you're doing it indoors in winter, it's competing with your desperate need to stay warm without burning through all your fuel in the first week. That tension is exactly why the next method exists, because trying to heat your whole house is how you freeze by week 2. January 1977. A brutal winter slams the Midwest. Natural gas shortages trigger rolling blackouts and industrial shutdowns. In the hardest-hit neighborhoods, families stop trying to heat entire houses. They seal off bedrooms, hallways, unused floors. They move everyone into one room, usually the smallest bedroom or a corner of the living room, and they insulate it hard. Blankets draped over doorways, towels stuffed along the bottom of doors, sleeping bags layered on top of regular bedding. A single small heater, or even just body heat from 4 people packed into a 12 by 12 space, can hold the temperature 15 degrees warmer than the rest of the house. This is the Cold War logic of zoning. You don't try to defend the whole perimeter, you shrink the perimeter until it's actually defensible. The self-test is simple and immediate. Walk through your home right now and ask yourself, which room could I actually live in for 72 hours with the door closed? It needs to be small enough to hold heat, but large enough for everyone to sleep. It needs a window you can crack for ventilation, but also cover for insulation. And it needs to become the place where you move your core supplies: water, your sanitation bucket, your first aid kit, your radio, your flashlight. The immediate fix is a weekend project. Pick that room. Tape plastic sheeting or a heavy blanket over the window to block drafts. Throw a foam mat or extra blankets on the floor. Move 1 jug of water, 1 box of snacks, and 1 battery-powered light into that space. That's your core zone. If this lasts 30 days, you live there, you sleep there, you eat there. You only leave that zone for 3 reasons: sanitation, cooking, or a task that's truly critical. And you schedule those exits: morning, midday, evening. You don't wander. The mistake most people make is trying to maintain the whole house: heat in every room, lights on, moving between floors, keeping up appearances for nobody. That burns resources and it shatters morale. The fix is brutal in its simplicity. 1 room, 1 routine. Everyone knows where everything is. But when you zone your home like this, you create a second problem that's less obvious. At night, in a neighborhood where every house is dark, 1 lit window turns your home into a beacon that everyone can see, and that's dangerous. There's a civil defense film from 1951 called Survival Under Atomic Attack. It never uses the word blackout, but it spends 4 solid minutes on something they called light discipline. The principle is sharp and clear. Light is a signal. In a crisis, signals attract attention. Attention creates risk. The families who survived extended grid failures in the 60s and 70s weren't the ones with the brightest lanterns and the most candles burning. They were the ones nobody noticed. The self-test is uncomfortable, but you need to do it. Tonight, turn off every light in your house. Wait 10 minutes for your eyes to adjust, then walk outside and look back at your windows. Can you see the glow from someone's phone? Can you spot the flicker of a candle? Can you see a silhouette moving past the glass? If you can see it, everyone else can too. The immediate fix costs you nothing. Move your light sources down to the floor or tuck them behind furniture so they're not shining directly at windows. Use the smallest, dimmest light that still lets you function: a single candle, a flashlight on low mode, a small booklight. Cover your windows with dark fabric, cardboard, or blackout curtains if you've got them. Tape down the edges so no light leaks through. And create a night routine starting now. After sunset, no bright lights anywhere, no movement near windows, no phone screens visible from outside. If this lasts 30 days, you formalize the whole thing. You create lighting zones. 1 dim lantern in the core room, nothing in hallways, nothing anywhere near exterior walls. You schedule your brightest tasks for daylight hours. You train everyone in the house to instinctively turn away from windows whenever they're holding a light source. The mistake is assuming it doesn't matter because everyone's in the dark anyway. That's not how it works. In a neighborhood blackout, the house with visible light becomes the house people walk toward to ask for help, to borrow supplies, to see if you have what they need, or worse. The correction is silence and invisibility. You become boring, forgettable, a house that looks just as cold and just as dark as every other house on the block. But here's the trap invisibility creates. When you can't see what's happening outside, and you can't check your phone, and your neighbors keep knocking with rumors and conflicting stories, how do you know what's actually real? That's where information discipline comes in, and it's simpler than most people think. August 5, 1963. The emergency broadcast system officially replaces an earlier system called CONELRAD and stays operational until 1997. The premise was brutally simple. During a crisis, one authoritative source broadcasts the truth on AM and FM frequencies at fixed, predictable times. Families who survived long outages learned fast. You don't leave the radio on all day. You listen twice, morning and evening, at fixed times you choose in advance. 10 minutes per check. You take notes. You compare today's broadcast to what you wrote down yesterday. If the message repeats word for word, nothing's changed. If it shifts, you flag it and note the difference. This was the anti-rumor system. Here's your self-test. If the internet dies today, how do you confirm what's real and what's just noise? Most people have no answer at all. The immediate fix is a battery-powered AM/FM radio and a pack of spare batteries stored separately so they don't corrode while they sit. Test it right now. Find your local news station, write down the frequency on a piece of paper, set 2 times per day when you'll check, say 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., and commit to those windows. If this lasts 30 days, you add a notebook, 1 page per day. You write the date, the time, and a 3-sentence summary of what you actually heard. You don't editorialize, you don't spiral into speculation, you write facts. Power expected back in 5 days. Boil all water. Avoid downtown area. That's it. You close the notebook, you turn off the radio to save the batteries, you don't check again until the next scheduled window. The mistake is leaving the radio on all day long, scanning frequencies, hunting for updates every hour. That drains your batteries, fills your head with conflicting reports, and turns useful information into meaningless noise. The fix is disciplined windows. 2 checks per day, fixed times. Write it down, turn it off, move on with your day. Because here's what happens when reliable information fails. People start moving. They head toward stores, toward rumor sources, toward anywhere that feels like safety. And that's exactly when fuel becomes the next breaking point, and when you need to think differently about movement itself. The 1973 oil crisis didn't just create gas lines snaking around city blocks. It created an unplanned nationwide experiment in fuel discipline. Families who adapted fast stopped using their cars for small trips. They walked to neighbors' houses. They batched their errands. 1 trip, 5 stops, everything planned. They mapped their routes in advance. They kept cars parked for days at a time and only moved them for critical resupply or real emergencies. Here's the self-test, and it's harder than it sounds. Can you live 7 full days without your car and not break your basic logistics? No grocery runs, no pharmacy trips, no quick drives because you're bored or restless. For most people, the honest answer is no, because modern life is built entirely on micro trips. The immediate fix is a map and a list. This weekend, walk your neighborhood on foot. Identify 3 places you can reach in under 30 minutes without a car: a water source, a neighbor you actually trust, a corner store or community gathering point. Write down the routes, time them, then make a list of every task that requires leaving the house and rank them by genuine urgency: water, medicine, food, fuel, information. If this lasts 30 days, you shift to a phased system. Days 1 through 3, you don't leave unless it's genuinely critical. You use what you already have. Week 1, you make 1 planned trip, on foot if at all possible, and you knock out multiple tasks in a single loop. Week 2, you assess whether fuel is even available and whether the roads are actually safe. Weeks 3 and 4, you ration any remaining fuel strictly for emergencies. medical crisis, evacuation, or a supply run that absolutely cannot be done on foot. The mistake is burning fuel right at the beginning, driving around to check on friends, driving to see if the store's open, driving just because sitting still makes you anxious. That traps you later when you actually need mobility. The correction is simple in theory. Assume fuel is finite. Assume resupply isn't coming. Move only when the task genuinely justifies the cost. But here's the problem limited movement creates. When you're not driving around, not checking in visibly, not out there where people can see you, your neighbors start to wonder about you. And that raises the hard question. Do you coordinate with them or do you hide? The answer is both, but it has to be done carefully. The Federal Civil Defense Administration ran something in the 1950s called the block warden system. It was built on minimal practical coordination, nothing fancy. Each block had one designated person, not a leader, not a commander, just a checkpoint. That person knew which homes had elderly residents, which ones had medical needs, which ones had useful skills like nursing or carpentry. The system didn't require meetings or pooled resources. It required one simple agreement. We check in once a day, we share critical information when it matters, and we don't advertise what we have. Here's your self-test, and it's awkward but necessary. If your street lost water tomorrow morning, who would you actually call? If you don't have an answer, you're isolated. The immediate fix is a quiet conversation with one or two neighbors you genuinely trust. You agree on 3 things, and you keep it simple. 1, a daily check-in signal, maybe a specific time when you'll be visible outside, or a knock pattern or a porch light rule if power comes back. 2, a way to share urgent information without gathering in groups or making noise that carries. 3, a mutual agreement that nobody discusses supplies, stockpiles, or preparedness levels with anyone outside your tiny circle. If this lasts 30 days, you formalize roles without making it weird. One person tracks information from the radio, one person monitors water sources or shared infrastructure like a community well, one person checks on elderly residents or anyone isolated. You don't create a crisis committee. You create a quiet, functional network that runs on trust. The mistake that gets people hurt is talking about your stock. The moment you say, "I've got food for a month," or "I have a generator in the garage," you've made yourself a target. The correction is silence. You're helpful, you're visibly present, but you're not interesting. You're not the house people remember when they start getting desperate. Because the house people remember becomes the house people visit when things get bad. And that's where the next layer comes in, making sure your house isn't worth visiting in the first place. Cold War civil defense manuals almost never used the word defense. They used the word deterrence. The goal wasn't to fight anyone. The goal was to reduce your attractiveness as a target in the first place. In the December 1961 manual called Fallout Protection: What to Know and Do About Nuclear Attack, there's a section focused on what they called passive hardening, small friction points that make your home less appealing to outsiders without making it look fortified or militarized. Here's your self-test, and it requires honesty. Walk past your own house the way a stranger would. What signals resources here? A pile of supply boxes visible through a window, a generator humming loudly in the yard, a bright, warm glow cutting through the darkness? The immediate fix is order and silence. Move any visible supplies away from windows where people walking past can see them. Control noise. No loud conversations outside. No generator running at night unless it's absolutely critical. No cooking smells drifting out into the street. Secure your basic access points. Lock doors, keep garage doors closed, keep curtains drawn. You're not building a fortress, you're becoming boring. If this lasts 30 days, you add a night routine that becomes automatic. After dark, you move quietly inside. You don't shine lights toward the street. You keep one person awake per shift if your household can manage it, not to patrol, just to listen. You make note of unusual sounds, cars stopping for no clear reason, Footsteps on gravel, knocking at odd hours. You don't respond aggressively, you respond with friction. Locked doors stay locked. You answer through the door without opening it. You're polite but vague. We're doing fine. We don't have anything extra. Good luck out there. The mistake people make is looking fortified. Bars on the windows, visible security cameras, sandbags stacked up, warning signs posted. That signals fear, and fear signals resources worth protecting. The correction is invisibility. A quiet house, a cold-looking house, a house nobody thinks about twice. But even the quietest, most invisible house will collapse if the people inside it collapse, and that's what actually breaks most families in a 30-day blackout. Not hunger, not cold, the human system. That's the final piece, and it's the one that matters most. Your fridge stopped counting down 3 weeks ago. It's just an insulated box now, nothing more. The house is cold everywhere except the core room, and that room is livable. You're clean because you've kept the sanitation station running on schedule. You have water because you rationed it hard and rotated it like you planned. You've cooked small meals every morning and stretched them across the day. You've stayed dark at night. You've checked the radio exactly twice a day and written everything down. You haven't wasted a drop of fuel. Your neighbors know you're alive, but they don't know what you have. And yet this morning, there was a fight. Someone forgot whose turn it was to refill the water containers. Someone else didn't clean the pot after cooking. A third person keeps asking how much longer is this going to last, and nobody has an answer that satisfies them. This is the collapse point. Day 22. Day 25. The part where the system is still working perfectly, but the people running that system are starting to break. Because humans aren't built for endless vigilance. We're built for routine. We're built for defined roles. We're built for rest. And without those things, even the best system in the world eventually fractures. That boring sentence buried in the civil defense guidance, the one almost everyone skipped, wasn't about buckets or water storage or blackout curtains. It was this. Establish a fixed daily schedule with assigned responsibilities rotated weekly to prevent fatigue and conflict. That was the whole thing. 12 plain words. But it was the hinge everything else turned on. The families who held together for 30 days straight weren't stronger or braver than anyone else. They had a schedule. They had turns. They had a rule that said, today, you're on water duty. Tomorrow, I am. Today you cook. Tomorrow, someone else cleans. Today you listen to the radio and take the notes. Tomorrow, you rest. Here's your self-test, and you can do it right now. If tomorrow looks exactly like today, who does what? If nobody knows, you're one argument away from total collapse. The fix is a visible schedule. 4 daily blocks. Morning is water and hygiene, midday is cooking and core tasks, evening is your information check and sanitation, night is rest and rotation. Assign roles to specific people. Write those roles on paper and tape that paper to the wall in your core room where everyone sees it. Rotate those roles every week so nobody burns out. If this lasts 30 days, you add weekly minimums, tasks that have to happen but don't need to happen every single day. Inventory check, battery swap, gray water disposal. You assign those tasks to specific days of the week. You make it all repeatable so nobody has to make decisions while they're under stress. The mistake is improvising every single day. That creates decision fatigue. It breeds resentment. It leads to errors. The correction is taking decisions off the table entirely. The schedule exists. You follow it. You don't debate it. You don't negotiate it. You just do it, day after day. Because the schedule isn't about control. It's about reducing the load on everyone's brain so you can all stay functional when everything outside your walls is pure chaos. This wasn't prepping. It was a system that removed decisions. It wasn't about buying more gear or stacking more cans. It was about running your household like a small operation. Fixed roles, fixed times, fixed places for everything. Sanitation in one corner that never moves, water rationed and rotated on a chart, cooking once a day using a method you've tested, one core room where everyone lives, lights kept low and disciplined, information gathered twice a day on a schedule, fuel saved and spent only when it counts, neighbors coordinated quietly without fanfare, home defense through sheer boredom and invisibility, and a schedule that keeps people from breaking under the weight of 30 days without power. The 10 methods aren't steps you take once, they're a loop. Each one holds the next one up, and the whole thing runs on one principle that civil defense planners understood cold. Systems beat stuff every single time. If the power dies tonight, you won't fix it with a bigger battery or more canned food. You'll fix it with a plan you can run in the dark. The guide is in the description. You can download it for free. Print it. Keep it somewhere you'll actually find it when the lights go out.